that should.
Now we can see the Jan website.
Okay, great. All right, and there are a number of photos that will kind of shift through here. I don't know if it'll do it while I share, but you'll notice that we have right on our home page now a coronavirus disease 2019. You can see here we have the link specifically for employers, for individuals. Here's our alphabetical listing. You can go specifically to our ADA library to do an accommodation search, publications. You can come over here and open up a chat. I'm going to need to move that a little bit. So here's how to start a live chat with us. And again, down here we have links specifically for our different target audiences. We have a toolkit. I didn't even talk about the toolkit. I can kind of pop into that for a second here and show you that.
DJ, this is Phil. Can I ask a brief question?
Please do.
Thanks. And you may have covered this already. Walt, I got thrown out of the panel there for a minute. He does that to me every once in a while, DJ. Just at random. But I was wondering, in the calls that you guys get from employers, and I understand they call too, what would you say are the one or two factors that make employers most willing or amenable to implement accommodations? What are those things that make employers want to engage in this process? And then what would you say, even over time, would be the most prominent concerns that employers seem to keep bringing up regarding accommodations? And I apologize if you've already covered it.
Oh, no. I think I'll probably go with the second part of that question maybe first. Concerns. Cost is always a concern. How much is it going to cost them to be able to make accommodations for someone? I think another concern, and I don't know, this one always maybe confuses me a little bit, but sort of a feeling that how can I justify making a change for one person that I don't make for others? The understanding that accommodations are appropriate for someone who has a disability. But I think too, some of the issues that show up kind of again and again is attendance, being able to have a person not have to be absent as much, maybe due to a disability. That's a very frequent topic that comes into play. As I indicated during my presentation, to be productive, you kind of have to be there. You have to be doing work. Right now, one of the really big areas for us is telework and making sure that people have what they need in order to be able to work successfully from home specifically for people with disabilities. That becomes an issue of having the accommodations available at home as well as
absolutely.
Workplace. Yeah. So
I'm wondering in the inquiries, DJ, the employers make, we're now 29 years into the first effective date, right, of Title I of the ADA.
Right.
Do you find employers, their questions about ADA, because the answer to some of those concerns that you mentioned are really ADA awareness, right? In many ways, we talk about the law and how it works and why, accommodations are by definition things that help people with disabilities that other people may not be eligible, may not be entitled to at the individual level. Are the questions getting more kind of specific, technical assistance? It seemed hard to imagine that, with the history we've had now of the ADA, employers, they've all heard of it now. They've all had to have responses from it. Are the questions getting more specific and technical and now COVID related and work at home? And Are you finding that evolving over time? I don't know. I'm just curious.
They are evolving over time. They have. They've gotten more complex. That's one thing. We're getting a lot of inquiries, every day. We keep very busy around here with the number of questions that we get asked, the number of customers that we serve every day. That certainly has not slacked up any at all over time, but they have gotten more and more complex as we've gone over time. And part of that is due to the evolving nature of technology, which has become more complicated, but it's also very much related to the ADA and how it's been interpreted, how it's been defined, what it means in terms of specific disabilities and who is and who is not covered. That's, I think, one of the things that has always been kind of a concern for employers is sort of the non-specificity in the ADA. There wasn't a hard list of these conditions result in disability, definitively, and these do not. But
undue
you can't
hardship on a case-by-case basis. And,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you just, there was no way to do that. It wouldn't have been appropriate for anybody. The other question that we get every once in a while, I will say this one's not as frequent, but, we will get kind of asked questions of, well, what if I want to have an accommodation closet, if you will, I want to make sure that an employee walks through the door and they need something, we can just hand it to them and off they go. Well, why would you do that? You're going to waste a lot of money on things that may never get used. What you do need, you're never going to have. It's just, you have to do accommodations on a one-by-one basis. And we actually have a saying here. We always say accommodations come in groups of one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, and it speaks to the whole individualized nature of the entire process, for sure.
Right.
I'm going to be quiet. In 1 minute. Broadening this out a little bit, we also, over the last 29 years or so, have evolved quite a bit in our thinking societally, I think, about universal design. And universal design principles are sort of the obverse of individual accommodations, where if you make structures of the society as accessible as possible, right, to as many people as you can, then you don't need as many individual accommodations. And I'm wondering if people are calling employers and workers too about those kinds of the idea that an accommodation, even for an individual, could benefit others.
Right, they are. We're hearing that, I'd say, probably more than ever. We work a good bit with the vendors as well and product designers, and that's certainly on their minds. We've at least seen some movement toward building devices that already incorporate accommodations in, which is wonderful because it does make them available for use by a much broader audience, and with less having to add in additional pieces of equipment that would be needed to assist someone who has a disability. And it reduces the stigma for being able to use that equipment.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Walt. You can throw me back out of the panel. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Christine had a comment, and Christine's comment is, good story. You can be a motivational speaker for people with disabilities too.
Thank you.
And we had Jennifer had a comment. I work in rehab, and when I disclosed my disability, my boss was very stigmatizing.
That can happen. I mean, that certainly is something that we see. I'll say this. I said you can call us and talk to our consultants, to our professionals, or you can use our website and do your own searches. One of the things that we consistently find is that the highest number of searches done on our website have to do with disabilities that have a higher stigma associated with them. So I always find that interesting.
We have a couple questions. This question is from Mary Ellen. Do you work with individuals with mental health issues such as anxiety and panic disorders?
Yes, a lot. Again, that's an area where we're seeing an increasing demand, and I don't mean increasing by small amounts. I mean increasing by huge amounts. I think over like the past 3 years, we've seen a 22% increase in the number of inquiries related to mental health conditions. The big difference between accommodating a person that has a physical limitation versus, say, something like a mental health condition is that for a large number of accommodations related to physical limitations, it is a device, it is a product that is involved. Buy this thing and put it in place, and you've accommodated the individual. But when you're talking about accommodating somebody that has a mental health condition, behavior disorder, or maybe a brain injury, a lot of the time you're talking about making changes to the way the work is performed, modifying policies and procedures that are in place and doing the work maybe a different way, or changing the environment in some way so that the person is more comfortable in being able to do the work. It might be moving the work site for the individual to somewhere where there's less traffic, less interruptions, less noise. It may be allowing more flexibility in terms of taking breaks, or allowing a person to contact a counselor or somebody else that can kind of help them walk through a difficult situation. It can be not so much reliant on assistive technology as it is on just modifying the environment in some way where they're working.
Lynn says that fits with what is happening on my caseload, a big increase in anxiety.
Anxiety is becoming more and more a part of our everyday life. It really is. And helping people deal with that. I know you're here working at West Virginia University, just what we see as employees is that as our employer, WVU is making more and more resources available to us through group wellness that are designed to help us reduce stress, reduce anxiety, to be able to cope better with the stresses that we're all experiencing. People respond to different situations and scenarios in unique and individualistic ways. Some people have done very, very well with the restrictions due to the pandemic and kind of the reduction in social interaction. And there are other people who have had a great deal of difficulty in dealing with that. So, in being able to help folks continue to do their best work, be able to still be engaged with others and do so safely, that's an enormous area of need that we're seeing.
Mary Ellen asks, can a student who is struggling on fieldwork training and need some accommodations that would carry through to their future workplace use JAM.
Yes. Yes. Anything that can be done to help a person who is in the educational process learn better, it means that they're prepared for the employment setting all the better when they get there. It's going to make them more likely to be employable, to get the job that they want, to have the career that they would like to have. So we don't get a lot of calls from students, I will say that, but we can talk to folks that, especially when you're in that situation of a practicum, perhaps, or a field placement. That's when probably the very first time that it's going to become really apparent that an accommodation is needed.
This question is, what does it mean when it says the onus is on the employer to prove that there is an undue burden? What must an employer do, and who do they prove it to? Or is it just a matter of the disabled person having to sue first?
It depends on the person with a disability and kind of what they're able to negotiate with an employer. Different employers have different abilities to implement accommodations. If you have a very, very small business, they're not going to have the resources, either financial or otherwise, to be able to put in place the same accommodations or spend the same amount of money as, say, a Fortune 500 company would. And so, that all has to be taken into consideration of what is appropriate for, a given employer in accommodating an individual. And as I said earlier, there's not a hard and fast list in the ADA of what disabilities are or not covered. The same thing applies to what is and is not reasonable. It's all on a case-by-case basis. And sometimes an individual just has to sort of work through the whole process of, advocating for themselves in terms of getting accommodations made, or maybe bringing a rehabilitation counselor in on their behalf, moving through the legal process if that becomes necessary. We hope not, but sometimes it does. And then whatever the courts kind of decide specifically related to that case.
Do they have to declare it? Do they have to declare it after an accommodation has been requested? The employer says no, but doesn't give a reason why.
I'm not real sure I followed that question. So if the person asking wants to clarify that a little bit, an employer may put an accommodation into place and maybe it doesn't work. One of the things I've always said is you have to have buy-in on both sides. Before an accommodation is made, both the individual and the employer have to decide that this is going to work, that this is an appropriate accommodation likely to result in a positive outcome. Because really, if either party says up front, that's never going to work, that's what's going to happen. It's not going to work. But if it should turn out that a particular accommodation doesn't work, that's why I made the point earlier. Call us back. Get back in touch with us. We'll keep working through this process. It's not just a one-time through the loop and you're done. If things aren't working out or the situation changes or whatever, we'll go back up to the beginning and start through the process all over again, hopefully with a better resolution. I mean, we've seen a lot of times where an accommodation is working just fine. Then a new supervisor comes in and says, well, that's not how I'm going to let this work. we're gonna have to make changes here. You know, it can be for a wide variety of reasons why you have to kind of go back and readdress that situation. So does that make sense? Did that kind of maybe sort of answer the question?
I think so. I think so. That follow-up was helpful. Phil, do you have a comment or a question?
I did not. No.
Okay. Okay. This next question is from Sheila. Do you do JAN presentations with employers? If so, can you share your contact information?
Absolutely. We do about 100 presentations every year. We used to do those live and traveled all over the country doing those. But these days, most of them are done just like this is via webcast. And we're delighted to do those, as many of them as we can. We have time to do. The best way is, call the 800 number, and you'll get the slides at the end here. Those will be shared with you, so you have the contact information. But you can call our 800 number and say you're interested in setting up a presentation, and our folks will work with you. Hopefully we can make that happen. And we also have on our website, we have archives of previous presentations that we've done. If there's maybe a situation where it's a very, very small group and we really can't justify, having the time to do a full-scale webcast with a very small group, we've got all those ones we've done before archived, and you can certainly make use of those. It's a great way to do that. But yeah, we do a lot of presentations. I just did a list yesterday for somebody of the presentations we were doing in April. And I think we had about 25 or 30 just taking place this month.
This question is, can you tell the audience, can you tell us briefly about the STAR portal for TBI? I often use it in my work. Thank you.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Yeah, that comes from a little bit of a different project that I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Dr. Rumrill on just a few years ago, in which we looked at accommodations for college students who had experienced a traumatic brain injury. And coming out of that, we developed what we called the STAR portal. And I can certainly provide contact info on that too, but there we posted information that was relevant to people with traumatic brain injuries and using technology to assist them with the project that we did. And I've always kind of wanted to even put the information out about this broader than what we were able to, although certainly we reached an awful lot of people with it. But what we were looking at was using devices such as, we used iPads specifically, but any sort of tablet computer, and using a customized set of apps for each student that would help them address the limitations that they were experiencing because of their brain injury. And the success that we had with that project was way beyond anything we ever imagined. We had a much, much higher retention rate for the students in college than we thought we ever would have at the beginning. We had students with much more severe brain injuries than we expected going in. We thought at the start of the project that we would primarily have students that had mild to maybe moderate brain injuries, but we had a lot of students with severe head traumas that left them with some pretty significant limitations. And we're able to find apps that really help them to be able to compete with their or interact with their peers, and in a very non-stigmatizing way. It wasn't that they were having to go around carrying some weird looking item that wasn't typical among other college students. It was, like I say, an iPad that lots of students carry those and use those in their studies. But yeah, it was a really just remarkable project that we worked on with that. Saw a lot of the students who didn't just graduate with their undergraduate degree, went on to get a master's, which just was something that certainly the literature led us to believe didn't happen. That so many students in that situation would drop out as undergraduates and never get their degree. But yeah, the STAR portal was what we worked up in terms of being able to share the information out with others nationwide. So thank you for mentioning that.
We do not have any questions at this time. If you have any closing comments, we can certainly, this might be a point for that.
Okay. Well, again, I'll just kind of point out, that I've got up sharing still on the screen here what our website looks like. I went into the toolkit, which I did not discuss at all, with lots and lots of, oops, there we go, opportunities for information in it. I can go to the A to Z link here. You can look alphabetically by disability, by limitation, by work-related function, by topic, by accommodation. It's all indexed here in a variety of ways. You can type in filters that you want to include. But you can see here the list of different disabilities that, and these are just the most common ones. We can discuss really any type of disability, but these are the most common ones that we get questions asked of us, and so we've developed particular materials related to those. But really, the number of resources that are available through our website is just mind-blowing. It just amazes me really how much we've put out over the years and continue to keep updated. We have our accommodation and compliance series for all kinds of disabilities. I mean, this list just goes on and on and on. We have our consultants corners, case studies, articles. You can subscribe. We have a mailing list that you can subscribe and get materials sent to you. So it is a lot. So any other questions?
Belinda asks, is there a resource list for the not so common disabilities?
No, we really, there are a lot of disabilities that we talk to folks about, and we'll provide materials that we kind of put together specifically for you. As I said, we have access to just such a wealth of resources out there. There are organizations that will or are specific to lesser known disorders or less frequently occurring disorders. And certainly we can put folks in touch with those, or let you know about information that they have available. The orphan drug programs and so forth that we can kind of link folks to. So it's, we can talk to you about and accommodate for, just any disability, any limitations. But on the website, we really do focus on the ones that are most common. And, for example, Addison's disease, we don't get a lot of calls about that, but we get enough that we certainly wanted to put together a document on. Anxiety disorder, that was one that's been discussed quite a lot here today. Attention deficit disorder, ADHD, auditory processing. I mean, it is just a very broad in scope set of materials.
Bethany asks, how do you access the STAR portal?
I can send the link for that. It is just another website, and so I can send out the link for that.
Okay. I noticed that this question is, I noticed that narcolepsy is not listed on your site. Do you have any suggestions about specific resources I can use to help my current customers?
We do have somewhere. Tell you what, let me go back out to the home page. We can do a search for that. Hopefully I spell it correctly and see what comes up. Sleep disorders. So there we have one that's found about different sleep disorders, insomnia, sleep apnea, restless leg, narcolepsy. So there is some discussion there. What the Americans with Disabilities Act kind of says about that, or doesn't, in other words. Making accommodations. So there are some that we list there. And certainly call our 800 number or start a chat with our folks, because we do have folks that specialize in that area and can talk to you about accommodations for narcolepsy and other sleep disorders.
Those are all the questions we have.
Okay.
I would like to thank you. As advertised, this has been wonderful.
Oh, well, fantastic. Thank you all so much. You've really had great questions. I've enjoyed meeting with you all today. It's been very, very interesting. I appreciate it.
It's been an honor and a privilege for you to join us today. So thank you for taking time out of your day to share your experiences and expertise with us.
I enjoyed it. Thank you all very much. And I hope you use our service. I hope you get a chance to talk with some of our consultants. They're just absolutely, totally delightful people. They really are. As I say, I've been here since this project started in 1979. I was working here before this project started. I was one of the people that helped write the original proposal. I would not have stayed for all these years if I didn't believe in what the project did, and if it wasn't just an incredible group of people to work with every single day.
Well, DJ, Jan's reputation precedes itself for sure, and you've demonstrated what Walt and I said at the very beginning. It's just one of the finest resources we have related to the employment of people with disabilities, and it's just always a pleasure to work with you. And I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us for taking time this afternoon. And thank you all for tuning in, and stay with us. We've got more of these coming up, and with that, we'll close, right, Walt?
Yes, we will. Thank you. Be well. Stay safe. Thank you all.
Yes. To all of you, thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.